Words We Misspell, a 1921 textbook. And it's a fascinating book. And I'm going to give you the beginning of it. Samuel Taylor Coleridge once said that there is one branch of learning without which learning itself cannot be railed at with common decency, namely, spelling. If our spelling followed the pronunciation of words, it would, in reality, be a greater help to the student of language than the present uncertain and unscientific mode of writing. In explaining the whimsical, antiquated English orthography, the eminent etymologist Professor Walter Skeat said, "We still retain much of the Elizabethan spelling, which at that period was retrospective, with a Victorian pronunciation. As a matter of fact, our present spelling violates both history and etymology. Bulwer-Lytton told us that it was impossible to find a more lying, roundabout, puzzle-headed delusion concocted by the father of falsehood than that with which we confuse the clear instincts of truth as our accursed system of spelling." He wondered how it was possible for any system of education to flourish which begins with a falsehood so monstrous that our very sense of hearing flatly contradicts it. And it goes on and on. Coleridge was, I believe, a poet from England. And there's something interesting that I used to know about Coleridge. It was some kind of a story he told. And the story was something about if you had a dream, and in the dream you were dreaming of rose bushes, and then what if you woke up and next to you on the pillow there was a rose? Samuel Taylor Coleridge. And the other fascinating one that they quote here is this guy Bulwer-Lytton. Bulwer-Lytton was an author and he was a traveler. So I believe he originated in England as well, and somehow related to the aristocracy. He might have been an aristocrat himself. And he ended up on the far side of Canada. And there's a small town in British Columbia, Canada called Lytton that was named for Bulwer-Lytton. So Bulwer-Lytton was famous for his opening line in one of his books, "It was a dark and stormy night." If you heard that, very corny, but that's the first time it was used, apparently. Now, he had an 1871 book. It was a kind of a sci-fi book called The Coming Race. And he talked about Vril, V-R-I-L. He talked about going from this world to another world. And he met a reptilian in this book, or one of the characters met a reptilian, which always ties into the idea of reptilians from, on our channel, Planet Draconis, the Pindar. And I mean, are there really reptilians? Way back in 1871, it was just a fictional sci-fi kind of book. But that was Edward Bulwer-Lytton. He went on to be a politician, and he was a baron, so yes, he was indeed part of the aristocracy. And then we have the strange former soccer player, David Icke of England, who keeps referring to the monarchy of Britain as being reptilian people, as if it was true. And then them using so much dragon mythology, St. George and the dragons. Anyway, the whole reason I never wanted to go anywhere near all this, and I got into this book, and lo and behold, I got into something completely different, because that's the way serendipity and synchronicity goes. I was going to talk about this, words we misspell, and it kind of gave you an introduction, because, for everyday purposes, in the Harry Potter world, all of us are known as muggles. So spelling is just how we put words down on paper or into a computer. But in Harry Potter, these words that we use have magics associated with them. And as far as words we misspell, well, any kind of misspelling in a hotter... Oh dear. I was going to say, in a Harry Potter world, means that the spell that you want to cast didn't work properly, or maybe backfired on you, or, someone you were trying to turn into a frog turned into a robin. But I said hodder. Hodder won't mean anything to you. To me, it's a strange street in my city, Hodder Avenue. It's strange because I've seen, it was just a bizarre occurrence. In the middle of a snowstorm, I saw someone who looked like a doppelganger, which is an exact clone of my very old aunt, walking across the street with her friend and a dog in a snowstorm. My aunt doesn't live on Hodder Avenue and nowhere near Hodder Avenue, and yet there was someone who looked just like her in the middle of a snowstorm. And my aunt had a dog many years ago, doesn't have a dog now. My aunt is in her 80s, so it wasn't my aunt walking across Hodder Avenue in a snowstorm, and yet there was someone who looked just like my aunt. So that's the strange story of Hodder Avenue. I don't know why that street is called Hodder. I don't know the history of it. I'll have to look it up. But anyway, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, Edward Bulwer Lytton, he talked about the vril, V-R-I-L, and vril turned out, I don't know before or after, how it's related. Vril is a secret society of Germany, and it became heavily involved with the occult, trying to win World War II for Nazi Germany. The Vril Society. There was a second secret society, occult society, called the, I don't know how you even say it in English, Thule. So it's either Thule or Thule. I don't know. I don't know German. I'm not trained in German, and it's a very weird word in English. But that brings you back to the strange way things are spelled in English, because so many words are borrowed from other languages. And this is a fascinating book because it talks about how much the pronunciation of English has changed since Elizabeth I, which any student of Shakespeare will know Shakespeare was of the same time period as Elizabeth I. There's fascinating movies available about Elizabeth I. And there is a very interesting story about Elizabeth I. Her court astrologer, he was a man called John Dee, D-E-E, and John Dee was, well, a magician. And he worked with some kind of angels, and hundreds of years later, somehow the work of John Dee has come back into popularity, and the famous, well, not modern day, but I don't know the exact dates, but let's say 1925. The famous British magician Aleister Crowley. Is it Crowley or Crowley? I don't know. Our spelling does Mr. Crowley, I think. I don't know. I don't know. Crow or Crow? How would you pronounce it? It's very difficult, and English is my first language. For someone who has learned English as a second language, what an incredibly difficult language to learn. Anyway, the magician Aleister Crowley somehow is wrapped up with John Dee, the astrologer for the court Elizabeth I, and Shakespeare, always celebrated as such a great writer. And the same time period we had Sir Francis Bacon and the big dispute whether Bacon was Shakespeare. I keep going way off topic. Then I want to talk to you about the 1901, 1902 book, Cosmic Consciousness by Richard Maurice Buck. He went back in history and looked for people who were basically like Buddha or Jesus, who had cosmic consciousness. And I believe Francis Bacon was one of the people that he put in there. Aleister Crowley was of a later time period, and after this book, Cosmic Consciousness, so he wasn't in there. But if you want to pick up that book, that's a fascinating book, very interesting, and it gives you an insight into the way a very great mind of around 1902 looked at things. He was what was known as an alienist at the time. Today we'd call them a psychiatrist. Anyways, that was Richard Maurice Buck. He was a Canadian. So this is another talk about words, spelling, magics, Harry Potter, secret societies such as the Vril and the Thule, Edward Bulwer Lytton, and the other guy I talked to you about was Samuel Taylor Coleridge and the Dream of the Roses. What does it all mean? Well, I'm giving you précis of all kinds of things that I've been looking into and trying to keep it short so that you'll watch them and get your interest up so that you'll go and pick up some of these books. It'd be wonderful if you picked up some old books from an old bookstore of as old as you can get. As old as you can get. And if you want to cheat, well, I always cheat by going on Amazon and getting the Kindle book samples, which are free. And you can download as many as you want onto your smartphone. And then when you're sitting at the bus or on your coffee break or wherever you go, you can start browsing through samples of books. Because there's information in books, not so much fictional books. I used to read so much fictional books. I mean, Harry Potter is supposed to be a fictional book. But literature, famous classic works of literature are good. I don't know. I mean, I've got so many books. There's a famous story in Star Trek, the original series, where Captain Kirk was being tried for a court-martial, and this is way in the future, hundreds of years in the future, the original Star Trek, and the lawyer that was appointed or hired by Captain Kirk to defend him, instead of using they called them computer tapes in those days, this particular lawyer always referred to the law in books. If you have Netflix, you can get this episode. It's called Court Martial, Star Trek, the original series. And is it a good? Everything in Star Trek is good. Where should you start? Well, you've got so many of these series of Star Treks. Start with the beginning. Start with Star Trek, the original series, because it's the start of it all. If you were going to start seeing Star Wars, would you go to episode 4, which was the original movie, or would you start with episode 1? That might be more difficult. But the thing was, episode 4, um, we didn't know there was going to be all these other Star Wars movies. It was the only Star Wars movie. So, I don't know. That's where I started anyway. I read the book and then I saw the movie. What did I like better? I think I liked the book better. The original Star Wars book. I am out of time. I must go. Thank you for watching. Oh, damn. I was trying to keep it under 15 minutes for the people on Instagram, and I've gone over. I'm at 16 minutes. It's very difficult to keep my videos short. Anyway, I will cut you off here so you can go and have coffee and start playing with books.